Hi, my name is Weldon Green, and I'm a sports psychology trainer, and I work mostly in professional League of Legends. I started taking a serious look at esport in 2012, and in 2014 I started coaching more teams and more League of Legends. Of course, first I coached myself and tried to climb as high as I could. And then I started coaching teams, and I got really lucky, and the first 3 teams I was able to work with were CLG, and then TSM, and then G2 Esports. So after we lost in group stages last year, I noticed that there was drama on the front page of Reddit, and I was reading some of it, but I didn't really have a chance to dive into it because I was focusing on my family at the time, and because we had been gone for 4 weeks training, you know, I withdrew from the scene, so I missed almost everything. And then when I came back, I only heard about them maybe months afterwards. So I was really excited that when this year's Worlds rolled around that the topic came back up and I would have a chance to talk about it. So essentially, the thing that is really frustrating for me is that I really wish that that the Korean fan kind of base, or Inven, or in particular, you know, the other teams would blame me instead of the TSM players for the hack that occurred between the SKT-TSM group. I think and I believe that in traditional sport, it's always the coach that's responsible for the security of the team. And so I think that in esport it should be the same. It should be the coach's responsibility, even if there's a tech person who's doing the security, it should be their kind of fault if something is leaked or something is hacked or when something goes wrong. And we very much took responsibility in the coaching staff at TSM for the hack. And then when I left the team, that was because of the leak that happened on my watch, essentially. And I think that, so when we came to Korea last year when TSM came to Korea last year to start our training camp, it was with a lot of optimism and hope, because we had very good relationships between the players on TSM and the Korean players, and that's always, you know, where the basis for diplomacy starts. And so we were able to, because our reputation in 2016, we were able to get really good scrimmages right away. We didn't have to do the normal thing where, you know, you work yourself up to the top teams, and so we were able to get really good scrimmages right away, and everything was looking great. And then after the scrimmage, we found out that we had a hacker. Of course, TSM has many enemies, and there was a hacker who had access to our system for we don't know, for many months, and they were waiting for the best opportunity to hurt us. And of course they chose those scrimmages because they thought it would be the most damaging for us and for our relationship. And so afterwards, you know, we told the players, this is our fault, we should have been more secure, and we took responsibility for it to them. And of course it hurt our scrimmages, which is expected, and it should. And that was, I thought, the end of that for the time being. And luckily we were able to work with Riot, so this year actually the problem that we had, which was of course that there was a distance analyst or a distance coach who we couldn't afford to bring with us to Korea, this year they were able to give more accounts to all the teams universally, so that anybody with distance coaches can work in a secure setting instead of in an unsecure setting. So Riot was able to kind of fix the problem. But the biggest frustration, and the first frustration that I saw, was that people were attaching this problem to the TSM players when they had nothing to do with it. That it was the fault of the coaching staff, and of course of me, who should be responsible and held responsible for it, not TSM. So I think that there are 3 things that I saw in the Invent post that were kind of like 3 different separate issues, and I think that separating those is the best way to talk about it. So the first comment was the one about the Play-Doh therapy that SKT did in response to the leak. And of course SKT fans and TSM fans were all worried about the state of the teams. And on the TSM Reddit, one of the fans said, is the team okay? And unfortunately, I responded with sarcasm, and I really shouldn't have. I said, yes, of course, we're training more, and SKT is using Play-Doh. And underneath that statement, I said, I'm really proud of SKT for addressing this and for using therapy. And I was actually really excited that the SKT team had learned from MSI 2016 and had gone and done like a vacation before their boot camp and came in very prepared and without any burnout, and that they were treating the league seriously, and they did this content piece and the therapy with their players. And I was just very in awe of Coma and the way that they had adapted. Just in one failure after MSI, they learned everything, and then they did it properly in Worlds, and that to me spoke of a great jump forward for how League of Legends treats athletes. And so I'm really sad that I used sarcasm. Even though I did explain it afterwards, that part was not translated to InVen, unfortunately. But even so, I shouldn't have made the comment the way I did, because my field is sports psychology training. That's my focus, and I was really excited to see how much SKT had, how fast and how quickly they had developed, after their MSI experience. So the second easiest thing to deal with is probably the comments I made about Koreans being psycho-nationalistic. And I'm very sorry that I used those words, and there's really no excuse at all. I shouldn't have used that word, and I shouldn't have used it on the internet, and I certainly shouldn't have used it, in such an ambiguous way. And I'm very sorry. So I want to give you the context of the conversation, maybe, so you can understand why I said them, and so that you can accept the apology or not accept it. You don't have to. But essentially, in the comment thread of the video that I put out, which we'll talk about in a minute, I entered a discussion about my time living in Japan and my experiences, traveling in Korea and traveling in East Asia. And the conversation went on for a long time, maybe 29 or 30 different conversations. And at the end, I was talking about World War II, and we were talking about Japan and World War II and the Korean War and North Korea. And of course, my comment was in reference to the Japanese colonialism of World War II and the thing that happened when North Korea became North Korea. And I have learned a lot about making those statements. First of all, it's very dangerous on the internet to talk about history and to talk about them in a comment section. And I should be really careful with the words that I use, and those words should never be used in the first place. Although they are very, accurate, I don't think anybody would disagree that North Korea is very, psycho-nationalistic, and I don't think anybody would disagree that the Japanese in World War II were very, religious about their government and very psycho-nationalistic. But that is true of many different countries in history, and the comments I made were maybe not in the right place and not in the right time for that. And I certainly didn't mean it towards the South Korean people at any time, and certainly not towards the South Korean people in modern times. And the third and most important thing I wanted to talk about is the video I made titled Information Warfare in League of Legends. And this is because I think it's a good topic of conversation for us to talk about for the future of League of Legends. So in the video, I essentially said that we had proof of leaks of our picks from scrimmages to other teams. And I shouldn't have said that, because I have no intention of showing you the proof of those leaks. I'm not going to show you the Skype log from a player that I received, even if it was a Korean player or even if it was a Chinese player, because it would impact the player. They might lose their job, and I think that that's wrong. As a coach, my job is to look out for any player, every player, not just my own. And so I think that I should just not have said those accusations. But that doesn't stop the problem from existing, which is that players are friends with players on other teams, and they talk about their role with their friends. And that's just kind of how it works in League of Legends, because you want to talk to other supports or other top laners or other mid laners about what's happening in your role and what you're scrimmaging against, and in those conversations, the things that you're scrimmaging against get talked about. And that's the way that kind of information travels around and a meta is formed. And of course you want to be at the front of that meta, so as a coach, every single coach, including Korean ones, is very careful about which teams they have as training partners and which teams they have as testing partners, and which picks they use for each of them. And I think that that's very smart, and every coach should be doing it. And I believe that your coaches are taking care of your teams very well. I think that it shouldn't have to be this way. There should be some system or way of training League of Legends. For example, like Korea invented with sister teams back in 2013 and 14, where you can train securely. Maybe it's a tech solution. Maybe it's a league structure solution. Maybe it's an agreement between teams of some sort. But I think that there should be some way to make it so that at the World's Tournament, that the meta is more secret, and we're able to train, with better information security. Maybe it's not possible, but I think that if we all think together, maybe we can come up with solutions. So one of the other controversies was a comment that I made about SKT pawning off Western teams to lower tier Korean teams. And I think that maybe Korean fans thought I was attacking SKT when actually I was admiring them. I don't say that this is a bad or a good thing. I'm trying to actually just explain kind of how the system has evolved and talk about what it looks like so that we can talk about the future. And I think that if you think about League of Legends scrimmaging, in any world it makes the most sense for the #1 team to scrim the #2 team, and for the #3 team to scrim the #4 team, and to make lower teams prove themselves and work themselves up before they get to scrimmage top teams. That's just the way it is, because this is the way that it works. And I don't, of course, as a team that maybe loses, I have envy towards SKT and Longju this year, or maybe towards SKT and ROX and Samsung Galaxy last year. But I don't think that there's any fault here, or that they're doing anything wrong. But rather, the way that the system is now, usually when a Western team arrives in Korea, and it happened to every team I've been on, they get offered many scrims against lower tier teams. And of course, I think if you think about it, you can realize that players on these teams are also friends with players on top teams, and that the conversation goes back and forth. So some Western teams choose to do these scrims, and they're very careful about the picks that they choose. But of course, when you're training against Korean teams, you want to play your best games. So there's a balance there. And then, of course, some teams choose not to, and hold their fingers and cross their fingers and say maybe SKT or Longju, or last year SKT or ROX or SSG will come to us first. And it depends on the reputation you come into the system with. And so I don't think this is a good thing or a bad thing. Like I said before, I think that this is what's going to happen no matter what in the strongest region in the world. And so right now, that's Korea. Hopefully, for you guys, it will be the strongest region for a long time. But who knows what will happen. I think that if SKT lost Worlds to EDG this year, and then you guys as fans found out that they never scrimmed EDG, that you would be very upset, because it kind of looks bad. It looks almost disrespectful. However, I think that essentially there are kind of two groups of teams that you train against. There's your training partners, the ones that you train against all the time and that you train everything with maybe. And then there's your, I would say your testing partners, where you scrim every team to get a feel for them or a taste for them. And I think that in the LCK season and in the LCS season, teams have regular training partners, and at Worlds, teams will develop the same thing. They'll develop really good training partners, and then the other teams will be ones that they test against. And that's kind of like how the system works, and I think that there might be a better version in the future. Maybe something technology can fix that. Maybe we go back to something like what LCK had in 2013, 2014 with sister teams, which was a way that you could scrimmage privately and secretly and always have really high quality scrims. Or maybe something in the future changes culturally, and some other region jumps up and we realize that the system just transported itself to that region, and maybe that's a problem. And yeah, I don't know, I don't have a solution, but I think that it's good to talk about the way things are so that we think about the way things should be. Yeah. So this is in regards to training partner versus testing partner. Yeah. So one of the comments that was brought up about my Reddit comments was one where I said, Korean teams have not been scrimming foreign teams, and they haven't for a number of years in foreign boot camps. So basically, I'm talking here about the difference between training partner and a testing partner. Okay, so obviously, and I didn't say that this was wrong, but obviously the training partner for the #1 team, they want to have the #2 team, and the same #2 with #3. And I think that that's only natural. And when I say scrimmages, what I'm talking about is having a training partner, the one that you train 4 or 5 days in a row, and you have double blocks of, and you test all of your champion pool against, and the one that you're very secure with. So I don't believe that, aside from maybe Samsung White, that any team in Korea has chosen to have a Western training partner during Worlds. And that's not like a bad thing, because you get to train against the best teams, which are Korean up to this point, and you get to train with security of your information. So that's really only a good thing. I'm just saying that this is the case. And as a Korean fan, you should probably be rather happy about this, as long as you're winning, because it means that your coaches are choosing correctly, to choose the correct training partners. And as a coach from the West, my job is to make my team so good that we are better than a #3 or #4 or #2 team in Korea, so that we can maybe be a training partner for one of the top teams. But that's not liable to happen until one of our teams from the EU LCS or one of our teams from the NA LCS proves ourselves at Worlds. And that's not like an attack. I'm not attacking Korea for this. I'm just explaining that this is the way that the system is, and if Western teams want to train against Korean teams that as training partners, that they need to be better than the alternative, and that as Korean fans you should understand that this is the case, that Korean teams are doing the correct thing, and that they're testing everybody, and at the same time they're making sure that they're training against the best possible team. So the biggest frustration that came out of this for me was the impact it had on TSM. Like I said, I really hope that all of you direct everything kind of towards me in your comments about this, and the scrim leakage and all the commentary. And of course, I left TSM for that reason, to divorce them from the responsibility for what happened at Worlds there. And at the same time, the other frustrating thing that happened was that you guys did not understand how much respect and honor that I look at the Korean coaches with. I think that Korea really pioneered coaching in League of Legends. I think that Choi and Koma are some of the people that all of us look up to the most, and we admire the systems that they make, and we admire the way they do scrimmages, and we admire the way that they handle their teams. And many of my comments were kind of picked and given the color that maybe you think that I don't respect them and try to copy them and emulate them. And that makes me very sad, because the opposite is the truth. That I really think that Korean League of Legends is kind of at a pinnacle, and we all aspire to kind of copy the systems and the coaching and the styles that are emulated here. And I want you all to know that we have respect for the way that you do things here, even as we're looking for ways of kind of working around it and attacking it in a way to make our team the best. We have to understand the system in order to try to break it. So there's nothing wrong with us trying to break the system and attack it and try to become the world champions. It doesn't mean that we don't think that it's amazing. So, and as always, thank you for the fans who are watching League of Legends. I wouldn't have a job if League of Legends was not as large as it is in Korea and all over the world. And I hope that for you guys, Korea does well at the World's Tournament. I'm sure that you have nothing to worry about, and I hope that you cheer us on as well. 감사합니다.